behalf of everyone whose story could only be written in the greatest nation on earth, I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America. As a prosecutor, when I had a case, I charged it not in the name of the victim, but in the name of the people. For a simple reason. In our system of justice, a harm against any one of us is a harm against all of us. Fellow Americans, this election is not only the most important of our lives, it is one of the most important in the life of our nation. In many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man. But the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious.
Well, last night, Vice President Kamala Harris became the first Black and South Asian woman to accept the presidential nomination for a major political party. And as the vice president took the stage, she saw a sea of female delegates wearing white, a nod to women suffragists who fought and won the right to vote more than 100 years ago. In a passionate and fiery speech, the former prosecutor laid out her case to defeat former President Donald Trump in the election that is now just 74 days away. Before Harris, the night kicked off with speeches from Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper, and former Republican Illinois Representative Adam Kinzinger. Plus performances by singer Pink and a rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner by musical group The Chicks. CBS Mornings co-host Tony Dokoupil is leading our coverage of the DNC in Chicago. So, Tony, when I was talking yesterday to some of our political analysts, they said that, you know, this is going to be an opportunity for Kamala Harris to introduce herself, I guess reintroduce herself to the American people. And prior to this, we heard a lot about joy. Tell me your take on her speech and your biggest takeaways, because it sounded like, yes, there was joy, but there was also a lot of seriousness.
Yeah, there was a combination of both, and she really is introducing herself for the first time to a significant portion of Americans. I think people need to remember that she only came onto the national political scene in 2016, the very same election that brought the nation Donald Trump, now her opponent in this race for the White House in 2024. So she had a lot of biography in the speech. She talked about being a child of immigrants, a child of Oakland, California, her journey to being a prosecutor, as you heard in that clip that you played there. And that phrase, for the people, Kamala Harris for the people, she had a through line from the courthouse to the White House. She will be for the people. That was a theme of the speech. She also talked a lot, and you really felt this was for the people at home in the middle in this country who might join the Democrats for this particular election. She talked about being an American, loving this country deeply, feeling pride and privilege at being part of this country, calling it the greatest country on earth, the place where the only place where her story could be possible. There was a lot of frank, on the surface patriotism with flags waving as well. And then she was very tough on border talk and foreign policy talk. And you got applause lines out of that in a Democratic national convention. Not what I would have expected. Wasn't on my bingo card for 2024, but that's the politics of the moment when you have a Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump matchup, which, by the way, only 4 weeks and 6 days as of today old.
Remarkable. Yeah, it's, you know, hit the ground running. Here we go. Tony, thank you very much. Well, joining me now with more from the last day of the convention is Sean Sullivan. He's a campaign editor with the Washington Post. Good to see you, Sean. As we mentioned with Tony, Harris, you know, was the main event, of course, last night. She made an effort to reach out to all types of voters. I want to play some sound from her speech.
I know there are people of various political views watching tonight, and I want you to know I promise to be a president for all Americans. You can always trust me to put country above party and self, to hold sacred America's fundamental principles, from the rule of law to free and fair elections, to the peaceful transfer of power.
So a new Gallup poll shows Harris's favorability has grown 13% among Democrats and, crucially, independent voters since becoming the presidential nominee. That's good news for her when the race is incredibly tight. Was she effective in introducing herself to those Americans who were unfamiliar last night?
Yeah, that's a big question we're going to find the answer to in coming days and weeks as we see how voters react in these swing states, as we see how subsequent polls react. I think it's important to point out that, the tone of her speech certainly was one that was geared at, as you say, Anne Marie, those independent voters that are poised to decide this election in many of these key battleground states. We have a new campaign here. It's Trump versus Harris. It's not Trump versus Biden anymore, but strategists on both sides see the same small handful of states deciding this election, states like Pennsylvania, states like Michigan, states like Wisconsin, and then you look at Sunbelt states like Georgia, Nevada, potentially North Carolina, Arizona, and you saw a message from Vice President Harris that was very much geared, I think, at those voters. We'll see how effective it was. And, another notable part of the speech last night was she sort of framed herself as a change agent and somebody who could sort of turn the page on the Trump era. It's striking, though, because she, is the vice president. She is a member of the current administration. She's not technically the incumbent here, but she's part of the incumbent administration. So that's another aspect of this that will also be worth watching to see how that resonates with voters in key swing states.
Yeah, it strikes me that they're in this position as vice president, you can enjoy the best of both worlds in that you have that name recognition, but people don't know you all that well, and so they may impart upon you the things they believe you to be, but also kind of the worst of both worlds because you are part of the administration, you're not an outsider, and so you have to answer to what the administration has done that people like or don't like over the past few years. I want to ask you about something else that I think has been probably the most challenging for Harris during this during the DNC. The Israel-Hamas war has been a hot topic this whole election. And we saw protesters and sit-ins happening at the DNC. And Harris was asked to put a Palestinian American on the stage to do a speech. The campaign did not do that. I want to play some sound from Harris last night, though.
President Biden and I are working to end this war such that Israel is secure, the hostages are released, the suffering in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, security, freedom, and self-determination.
So, as you know, there were delegates that did not support her because they don't support how the administration has handled this conflict. Did she strike a balance?
She really tried to, and this issue is perhaps the most divisive issue within the Democratic Party right now. We've seen a lot of protests over the last many months here, as you mentioned, here in Chicago, outside the convention. We saw protesters gathering, and this is an issue that has really, inspired really impassioned protests on both sides. And I think we saw her try to strike that balance, as you say, Anne Marie. We heard her talk about Israel's right to defend itself, which sort of echoes what President Biden's position has been all along. But she did also acknowledge suffering in Gaza. She did also talk about the Palestinian people in sort of aspirational terms and talked about their ability to shape and determine their future. She won some pretty loud cheers inside the arena when she delivered that line. So it really is sort of a tightrope walk for her, and you could see that tightrope walk playing out on stage last night in this speech and this balance that she's trying to strike. And she's going to continue to have to do that, from now until Election Day. Politically, not an easy thing to do. We saw that for President Biden, it was even more difficult. In many ways, he attracted even more animosity and more protests from pro-Palestinian demonstrators. So this is the kind of thing that is not going away and could, inspire future strife within the Democratic Party.
Yeah. Sean Sullivan, thank you so much.